Good morning. Thank you for having me here. I know that this was a last-minute change, and some of you were expecting my good friend Robert Blair to stand up and talk on his experiences with UAV systems dating back 8 years. My experience with UAV and unmanned systems started in South Africa in 2003, where I first observed Monsanto using unmanned systems to monitor detasseling operations. Back then, it was a gas helicopter with a 35mm film camera slung underneath. So while this technology is new, well, relatively new here in the States, there is precedented usage elsewhere in the world, and you can get a lot done with rudimentary systems. Unfortunately, due to the short notice that I had to prepare this presentation, there is going to be some overlap with the previous speaker's address. So we're going to jump in. So, as already been said, I'm the CEO of Volta Aerial Robotics. I am a retailer and a manufacturer. I'm not going to talk about my products. You will see a few photographs of them, but we're going to try and steer clear because right now I'm wearing my other hat, and that is an industry advocate here in the States. So, since 2006, I've been pushing for the agricultural usage of UAVs. We've only seen a sea change in the last 18 months with this. So we're going to jump in. Okay, it's not working. There we go. Alrighty, so UAVs in agriculture. Two basic types of systems, as already been mentioned. Fixed wing, rotary wing systems. So here on the left-hand side, we see a quadcopter system. These systems are great for small-scale mapping, fantastic for crop scouting. Right-hand side, a larger fixed-wing unit. Okay, the wave sight, all right, capable of actually covering 3,000 hectares per flight with multispectral cameras, RGB, near-infrared, thermal if you want it. Okay, this is a medium-sized UAS system. So that's the general breakdown between the two different airframe styles. All right. Here we have some common UAV systems in agriculture. Okay, right now, at the top of the screen, a lot of you will be seeing these out there. DJI Phantom 3D robotic system. Lower down we have the Precision Hawk and the SensorFly EB. Great platforms, all good for various things, but the breakdown is still clear. Fixed wing aircraft for mapping, rotary wing units for scouting right now. Until the rotary wing systems develop better endurance. They're really convenient to use for a grower, easier to handle, but right now, if you can squeeze 20 minutes of flight time out of a small rotary wing system, that's going really well, okay? So if you're planning on mapping your fields, you have to lean towards a fixed wing platform versus a rotary wing platform. If you want to scout your fields, rotary wing systems make more sense. Now, one other common factor, all of these systems are really small, okay? A few pounds. But that doesn't mean that there aren't large systems out there in the world. Okay, and here we're going to see some really large systems. So on the left-hand side, we have the Marine Corps Pioneer or Shadow unit, a few hundred pounds. So you're already thinking, are these units going to start turning up in cornfields near me? A couple of 100 pounds, 300 pounds, flying for hours, okay, over accounting? Well, they already are. Okay, down in Uruguay, there's a company called ADP. They're flying 3 Pioneer-sized UAVs, okay, producing imagery of thousands of hectares a year. They're effectively leapfrogging us in a developing country. They don't have the regulation. They don't have the fixed-wing aircraft. So what do? They go out and develop and purchase, okay, UAV systems to do that imaging. So it's something to keep in mind, okay? Are we leading or are we following? And what are the reasons that we're following right now? In my opinion, and we're going to get into this later, a lot of the reasons that we're following is not because we didn't develop this technology here in the States. We've got this artificial restriction imposed on us by the FAA. All right, the FAA. How can you fly a UAV? So until recently, there were only 2 ways that a private individual or private entity could fly a UAV in America. Okay? You had to, if you were a public entity, you could apply for a COA, a Certificate of Authorization. a three-month process, okay, that you applied to the FAA. You submitted the details of your airframe, where you intended to fly, and the FAA would grant you a geographically restricted permission to use that aircraft. So if you're not a public entity, this doesn't help you, all right? So if you were a public entity, the only way to do it was a special airworthiness certificate. That's literally like building your own aircraft, fixed-wing manned aircraft, okay, and getting approval to fly it. In the history of the FAA, approximately only 90 of these special airworthiness certificates have been issued to UAV operators. So as growers, you say, how can we operate UAV systems? Are they legal? And I know that there is another speaker today, and they will address it, but I'm going to give you the facts as I know them and interpret them. Back in November last year, the FAA, through its spokesman, Les Dorr, made a statement, okay? And they said that growers, farmers, and we don't know what a farmer actually is, will be permitted to use UAS systems over their own property. Now, I'd like to see a show of hands in the room. Who here believes that they own the airspace rights above their private property? Anyone? Well, unfortunately, you'd be incorrect. We do not own the airspace rights above our property. I wish we did. What we do have is airspace access rights, and these are not clearly defined, okay? They are guaranteed by our Fifth Amendment private property rights that guarantee us access to airspace. And it is unclear what those rights cover. Can we go out and fly a UAV? Okay, the FAA would say, yes, you can fly, but you have to comply with FAA rules. Some of us would actually say that complying with FAA rules constitutes a taking of our private property. They're actually denying us access to airspace that we have rights to access. Now, these are things that you're going to actually have to think through when you get into this. Because right now, there are no FAA boots on the ground out in the corn belt, looking through the corn to see if you're flying. But the situation is so arbitrary that an FAA inspector could potentially become aware of your operations, and you could receive a cease and desist at best, or a $10,000 a day fine for your activities. And only in the last few weeks, we've seen a spate of cases, not in the ag sector, where individuals flying UAS, okay, have been made, well, the FAA has been aware of them. Only yesterday, there was a news article of two gentlemen flying in New York that were arrested for flying, okay, in a built-up urban area. So take this into consideration. This is not clear-cut. You do have rights. What those rights are unclear. Is anybody watching you to see if you infringe on those rights? No, probably not. Okay. Okay, so just this slide shows your airspace rights. So over here, again, are you entitled to fly? Where are you entitled to fly? Are you entitled to charge for this activity? Okay, if you ask the FAA, they're going to say no. If you had to ask a legal advisor, they would probably say that it's pretty unclear right now, and the later speaker today can clarify this point. All right, civilian use moving forward. What are we going to see in the next 10 to 15 years? Because maybe it's going to take 10 to 15 years. Everybody keeps making the mistake. They say that UAV integration is going to happen in 2015. I've got bad news for you. That's a mistake. The FAA is congressionally mandated to have a plan by 2015. We do not know what the contents of that plan are and what the timelines are going to be. The FAA could stretch out another 5 years, or they could play the ultimate joker card on us all and kick this back into the realm of politics and say that there are privacy issues that need to be determined. And then we could see integration happening in 2050, okay, because it will become a political issue. So keep this in mind. We're very early days, okay, right now. So, moving forward, reduction in the cost of technology. When I got into this and purchased my first autopilot in 2006, little car, a little bit smaller than a cigarette box, $10,000. You can purchase that same technology today for $250 online, and if you're any good with a soldering iron and have the patience, you can put together a working system for under $1,000 that you can go out and gather data with, okay? So the technology price point is dropping every day, okay? I envisage a point in time where UAV systems are going to be free. Buy a new tractor, get a quadcopter. Buy seed, get a fixed wing, okay? The writing's on the wall. Unfortunately, this brings us to another thing, is this is supposed to be a $180 million business in the next 10 years. And we have to ask ourselves, where are those dollars flowing to? Are they staying in America? Or are they leaving the country? Ask your vendors out there, where's your product from? Who is the manufacturer? You might get a surprise, okay? Most of the product out there today is not manufactured in the USA. It might be assembled, it's not manufactured. All right, next thing. Continued interest in the civilian sphere. We've seen that this has exploded. 13 months, half a year have gone by. Everybody thinks that big data and UAVs somehow work together and they're a match, okay? Everybody's trying to find the killer application from crop scouting to delivering beer, okay? We haven't dreamt up the killer applications yet, okay? Some 18-year-old or 12-year-old is going to invent the killer app on the farm, and we'll all be doing it, okay? All right, inertia on the part of the FAA. The FAA is not going to do anything quickly. I'll just put it in perspective. 12 months ago, I was in a call with the FAA, and they were looking for agricultural test cases. And the gentleman on the line said to me, tell us how growers are actually going to perform surveillance on their crops. And I said, surveillance? We scout crops, we map crops, we don't perform surveillance. But there's just an indication of the different mindset. A military mindset performing surveillance and a civilian application or interest performing mapping and scouting. Okay, agriculture is a blip on the FAA's radar. We need to make it the biggest blip. We're supposed to be the biggest user, yet nobody's driving our interests in the industry. Farm Bureau should be out there. The Bureau of Land Management, the USDA, they should be driving our interests to allow us to operate these systems of our own properties without FAA interference, with some kind of reasonable guidelines. Okay, and then we have the final thing, the privacy issue. How are your neighbors going to react to you flying a UAV? Are they going to perceive it as an invasion of privacy? Or do we educate them to the benefits of these systems? Alrighty, where do UAVs fit into the data acquisition process? So, satellite imagery, it's been out there forever. Okay, some of the benefits of satellites, they're not restricted by national boundaries. If you want a picture of corn in New Zealand and you're prepared to pay for it, you can get it. The FAA doesn't come into the equation. They're global, as I said. Some of the drawbacks, cost. If you got an 80-acre field here in central Illinois and you want a 25 centimeter resolution image of that field, you're going to pay to get it, if you can. Okay? You cannot change the satellite orbits, etc., to suit a small imaging job here in central Illinois on short notice. Okay? Sorry. Relatively low resolution imagery. And here's an example. These are samples from commercially available satellite imagery, sat shot in rapid eye. So what's the problem? The biggest driver here is for us to actually decrease the size of production zones in your fields and have more numerous production zones. You cannot do that with imagery of this resolution. Hello? Okay. Imagery of this resolution. What you need is imagery like this. That's a little bit difficult to see. This is winter wheat taken here in Illinois late last year. I think you can see on the screens, you can actually see the rows in that wheat. Okay, the telephone pole in there. We need high resolution imagery. We need it tomorrow, okay, to apply to our decisions. We can't wait for weeks. That said, there's 170 million acres in the Corn Belt. What is the most efficient way to actually acquire that data? Is it with a swarm of small UAV systems, large UAV systems, or satellites? And I predict that within 10 to 15 years, they will have to have solved the problems that they have with satellites. There will be a constellation that its sole purpose will be to monitor the Corn Belt and provide you with information. And if you do your work right, that information should be free, because that's how important this is. Okay? 15, 20 years, you'll stand out in a field with your equivalent of your iPhone and say, I need imagery, and somewhere in space, the shutter will go click, and they will take a picture for you. That's what should happen. So our UAV industry, it solves a problem right now, but it has a lifespan. All right, traditional methods of actually acquiring imagery. Fixed-wing aircraft. What's good about them? Okay, it's a proven technology. The FAA can control this. They can cover a large area, produce high-resolution imagery, modular. Okay, what are the drawbacks? Operating cost, the fact that they're not transportable, and they have limited availability. Now, we've already seen a trend in the industry. There are companies out there, and I'm going to drop names. Geo Advantage this year, okay, announced new pricing, okay, for Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, that is extremely competitive. So the UAV industry has to compete against traditional imagery services like this. And they are going to try their best to secure contracts with you, okay, because they know that it's their bread and butter, okay? So we have a lot of work to do in the UAV industry to compete with traditional aircraft. Also, if you think about it, there's systems out there on sale today here for a small UAV at $50,000, okay? You can go out and purchase a Cessna for $50,000 and put a camera system in it. So these are all things to keep in mind. What's good about UAVs? Low cost of operation, high resolution imagery. We can get an inch resolution imagery or below. Now, I don't want you to confuse resolution and geospatial accuracy, because there are a lot of terms being bandied about. Okay, we can produce 1.8 centimeter resolution images. So great, you can see an individual corn plant in a field, but on the geospatial side, how close can you get me to that corn plant? Can you get me within 12 inches of it? Can you get me right on top of it? Because these are things that you're going to need to know to feed into your spraying systems, etc. So if you can produce a 1-inch image resolution image, we're getting into this later, but you're 15 feet off in the field, you've produced a picture that I can stick on my fridge. Thank you very much. And these are the questions that you have to ask your vendors. All right, so what can we really achieve with UAV systems practically? So with small rotary wing systems, and I'm only going to use one example, which is VLOS, visual line of sight. According to FAA regulations and AMA rules, which is the Academy of Model Aeronautics, we have to keep our systems within visual line of sight. So with a small rotary wing system, you cannot push that system more than 1/4 of a mile out into a field, and then you can't see it anymore. As you go up in size, you might be able to actually bite off a quarter section and still keep the UAV in sight. We'll pretend to keep the UAV in sight, because you're going to lose it. You won't be able to see it, and you'll see it here today. As soon as that UAV system is 1/4 of a mile away, it is extremely difficult to see. If you can't see it, you're already breaking FAA rules and AMA rules. The bigger the UAV, the more territory you can actually image. So theoretically, if you're standing in the middle of a section, you should be able to see a UAV, a small UAS system. So if I can only fly a section per time, how much of the 170 million acres can I image in a season? We're talking of having to have thousands and thousands of UAS systems out here, okay, gathering this data. All right, different types of imagery. And this is covered partially in the previous presentation. So rotary wing systems, oblique imagery looking down to the side, great for crop scouting, allows you to see over the end rows, see what's going on in the field. Radar imagery, taking hundreds of images of a field, stitching them together while looking straight down, processing it, georeferencing it, rectifying it, etc. And there's work involved in this. It's not a matter of just going out and purchasing a fixed-wing aircraft and going and gathering images. There's real groundwork that you have to do. Okay, crop scouting. What are the benefits? They're really deployable. You can go out in your pickup truck, 2 minutes, you're in the air, it's like having your own personal helicopter. They're modular. So this means that rotary wing systems can carry visual cameras, they can carry video cameras, they can carry near-infrared cameras. I get asked this a lot. Can you put an NDVI camera on a rotary wing system? And I go, why do you want to do that? No, because we want to create NDVI imagery. And I say, okay, well, how big are your fields? Okay, 200 acres. I say, you should be looking at a fixed-wing aircraft, because to try and map NADAR imagery of 200 acres, you're going to be hard-pressed at 20 minutes flight time per flight. Okay, and then we haven't even got into the image processing problems. Now, there's systems out there with near-infrared cameras on them, and we can put near-infrared cameras on it, and it's a great tool, but this isn't going to actually give you NDVI per se imagery. It's just another infrared diagnostic tool. Okay, so here we have an example. Left-hand side is the raw near-infrared image, and this is the image after processing. It's been converted into NDVI fake color. And it could be useful because you're starting to see patterns in your field, okay, that you couldn't see in the green. But really, truly, if you looked at the green, the RGB imagery, you could probably discern those patterns anyway. It's a helpful diagnostic tool, but this is not the silver bullet, people. Okay, so here we see it, patterns showing up. So NDVI on rotary wing systems, as they stand today with their limited duration, it's an expensive, in my opinion, picture to put on your fridge. All right, so here we have another couple of examples. This is an example of NADAR imagery again, the field in southern Illinois in its entirety. Looking from the ground, it looks beautiful and uniform. You get up above it, it's a little bit difficult to see here on the right-hand side, but the patterns start to pop out once you see it. They've got washout patterns, possible areas that they could have done replant, etc. So the real value, scouting is great, the real value is in mapping. Okay. So what do you have to do to map? We heard it before. You go and you fly your fixed-wing UAV, you generate these hundreds of images, and now you have to process it. And you can process it yourself, you can send it to a service, but there's a couple of things in common, and these are things that the industry isn't talking about. Okay, so here is a couple of things that the industry isn't talking about. I'm going to get into them later. Okay, this processing could take days, depending on how many images you have and what resolution. And you have to have the computer horsepower and the geospatial skills to back it up. So here is a NADAR NDVI image, okay, produced here in Illinois, southern Illinois last year. This is a geo advantage image, actually. So this is an example of what you can see in the near infrared. So the dark blue areas, okay, are water damage, all right? And this field had two different hybrids in it, and some had been infected by green snap. And when we were standing on the side of the field, it wasn't apparent. Only once we got up and over the field could we see the extent of the damage in the one hybrid. And this in itself is a killer application for the insurance industry, because they can potentially work down to the square foot how much damage you've actually had in a field. All right, now we're going to talk about resolution and what is resolution. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to see with these projectors, but resolution is the size of an object and how many pixels make up that object. And here we have an image, and circled in red is a yellow stripe on the ground. It's 1 centimeter wide. So right now today, with FAA regulations, flying at 100 feet with a 20 megapixel camera, we can produce 1.8 centimeter resolution imagery. It's total overkill. Okay, you don't need it, but we can produce it, but then we have to deal with it. So you're talking about file sizes that can range up to 3 gigabytes for a single map. They're huge. All right, we're zooming down, and now you can see the little yellow stripe on the ground. 1 centimeter ruler, that's narrower than an inch. All right, so we talked about resolution. Now let's talk about geospatial accuracy. So we know where we've seen the pixel. Now can we put that pixel in the right place on the field? And what do we need to do that? This is something that the vendors aren't talking about. All right, you have to put in ground control in the majority of the systems out there. What is ground control? You have to go out into the field and put in at least 5 ground markers. 5 ground markers, not a problem. Then you have to measure them accurately. That requires an RTK GPS or a differential GPS system. Now you've got a problem. Some of you are already thinking, well, it's the middle of the season. How do I get 4 ground control points into a field of corn? Never mind canola, all right, or soybeans. Somebody has to walk out on their field to put that 5th marker down. Or never mind the back 2 corners. These are things to keep in mind. There is a method to actually generating this information and doing it accurately. So it's not just a pretty picture to put on your fridge. And there is a lot more work on the surveying side of this than people are willing to admit. Now, technology is moving forward to close these gaps. You say, well, stick an RTK GPS on your UAV system and eliminate the need to actually go out and put down ground control. And that is the obvious way forward. However, that is increasing the cost of these systems. So we've eliminated the work, but now you're going to have to pay more because those RTK receiver units aren't cheap. Getting cheaper, but they're not cheap yet. Questions to ask your vendors. Do they have a path, okay, to actually upgrade your UAV system? Right, if you do go out and put down ground control points, the geospatial accuracy of those pixels increases as you get closer to that ground control point. And the geospatial accuracy is only as good as the algorithm of the computer that's actually processing that imagery. Now, if you don't put down ground control, you don't have ground control out there, in a 300-acre field, you can have variations with topography of up to 60 feet per pixel. So this is one thing to ask your vendors. What is the geospatial accuracy of your data, and prove it to me? And if you had to ask me that question, I couldn't even do it. Okay. Alrighty, that sums up my presentation. I'd like to open up the floor to questions at this point. I know we're a little early. Okay, 15 minutes. Okay. Yes. That image was taken at 400 feet, not. Okay, I have to tell you that it was taken at 400 feet. Okay. It was taken higher than 400 feet. Okay. So that resolution was at probably about 10 centimeter resolution imagery. Okay, it was probably over 1,000 feet. You were flying. Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir. Quadcopter is a relatively mechanically simple system. The only real thing that requires maintenance are the motors. Most motor manufacturers are guaranteeing 50 hours of operation on motors. So it doesn't sound like a lot, 50 hours, but you consider that it's probably 200 15-minute flights. Motors are not expensive. You're looking at about $50 per motor. Yes, sir. I think that the minimum bar, sorry, yeah, Gary. Right now, it's not popular, but if you think the majority of the people in this room on their equipment now will have RTK-enabled systems or differential GPS systems. I would say that a minimum level of accuracy should be 12 inches. That's the distance between a row. That way you know that your 15-foot spraying boom isn't spraying a different hybrid, because we're going to get down to the point, I believe, that you'll have production zones of 12 inches if you wanted to. So I think a minimum accuracy guarantee of at least 12 inches would be a reasonable expectation for an end user. But that's my opinion. You might find growers that say 30 feet, it's fine. Okay. Well, it's for UAV instrumentation going forward, because if you think that today most combines and harvesters and sprayers have RTK, which is sub-foot, approaching inch resolution, it's already there, okay, for them. What we have to do is, in the UAV sector, we have to catch up with that, okay, at a minimum. What's going to happen post that? I believe that, a production zone of 1 square foot, okay, is a reasonable assumption, because if food pressures on food production continue to grow, we could kind of envisage a situation where the entire Corn Belt is mapped down to, 1 square foot production zones. Why not, if we can do it? Okay. All right. Yes, sir. Generally, unfortunately, like anything mechanical, there are symptoms. The question is can the operator, the question was, if a motor is running, will it go out suddenly, or will there be kind of signs, I'm implying signs that it's going to go out? There are always indications that something is going wrong. The question is can the operator actually pick up on those indications and take action? Unfortunately, a lot of the rotary wing systems are very unforgiving. They're either working really well and you don't have any problems, but when a problem develops, it tends to deteriorate extremely quickly and you can lose the system.
Other questions?
Yep, over there.
You mentioned that we can only get within 400 feet.
Correct. No, the actual issue is we actually need to go higher. Okay, we need to go higher because at 400 feet I can only cover so much territory because it means that I have to do this lawnmower pattern, okay, that I don't need to do if I went to a higher altitude. If I went to altitude, I could cover 3,000 acres per flight. But right now, I'm stuck working at a lower altitude because of regulation. So I would like to see an altitude limit of 1,600 feet. Okay, in rural areas, with the right safeguards, etc. So lower is no problem. We need to go higher. Yep. The answer there is you don't need to be at 1,600 feet. You need to be 3 feet off the crop, the cover crop, to be able to see that. So there you would have a fixed wing aircraft go map the field, see an area of interest, and then fly a quadcopter system out to actually fly at 10 feet above the crop with a very high resolution sensor to actually detect it. We've even seen situations where you can take a quadcopter system and with the downdraft of the rotors, flip the leaves on corn plants and soybean plants so that you can actually see the underside. But we're still learning. The honest answer is that there's no really good information out there, good practical studies being done on this. Okay. Yeah. This is another misconception. None of this technology, and I agree with you, I'm definitely not disagreeing with you, none of this technology negates the need to actually put boots on the ground. You're going to take this data and you're going to have to put your boots on and go out and ground truth this information. Okay, this is not a magic bullet. You're not going to sit on the porch, fly your UAV, and it's going to tell you you've got mites in your crop. It might tell you, but then you're going to have to go out and actually see it. Okay, for yourself. What it does give you, it gives you the ability to see more acreage, gather more information, and make better decisions. That's what we're doing here. We're not replacing the need for you to get out and go and look at your crops. Okay, yes, sir. I would say that we're talking, I'm going to say numbers because I haven't done the analysis on, I'm going to quote other people's numbers. We have seen numbers as low as 25 cents an acre up to this ballpark figure of about $3 an acre. I don't believe that 25 cents an acre is a reasonable value. You have to give somewhere there, okay, 25 cents an acre. You look at it from a commercial aspect as well. If you're putting in anhydrous ammonia and you stand to save 10% in your input, why should that imagery cost you 25 cents an acre when you stand to save hundreds, thousands of dollars on that? It will come to that point. Okay, the data will be discounted, and that's what we're seeing today already. That aerial data is being discounted. Okay, I think it's going to become more competitive, and probably in the future, it will be a government program that provides that data to you free of charge, because it makes sense. This is about food production at the end of the day. So maybe in 25 years, that information at 1 centimeter will be free, okay, to you. Yes? Yes, it would to an extent. So the question would this be like GlossSat picking up the Russian satellites? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Okay, it's two different systems. Okay.
Any more questions? We have time for 2 more. No more questions?
Question over here.
How long do you think it'll be for that FFA to really come up with something to get it implemented?
Okay, the question is how long I think it will take for the FAA to actually implement policy that we can work with it. As I said, I've been dealing with this since 2006. I've seen the FAA miss every single deadline that they've been given on this topic. They've just recently been criticized by the Department of Transportation on their inaction on this issue. Hopefully, I would like to see an exemption for ag this year, okay, and the subject kicked over to somebody like the Department of the Interior. Even the AMA or USDA manage certification and training for agricultural UAV usage. Reasonably, is the FAA going to give up this huge chunk of policy and control that they're going to do? No, it's not going to happen. So I think what's going to happen, though, is more and more people are going to be buying UAV systems and creating facts on the ground. We've got a situation that's kind of like ham radio. Ham radio comes out, you have to get a license. Nobody got a license. Everybody went to Radio Shack and bought a ham radio. Okay, and everybody in this room that's purchased a DJI and it's going out and using it, we're establishing facts. People are using these systems, and policy is going to actually have to catch up with the situation on the ground. Okay.
How about a nice thank you to Rory Paul?